Start the Internal Scrutiny Committee meeting on Friday, 10th of September, Equi. Just a few points. As you're aware, there will be no drill planned for this morning, no fire drill, that is. However, if a continuous alarm starts, well, please leave the building by the staircase and assemble in Arthur Street car park. Do not hesitate to gather personal belongings and do not use the lift. Wait at the assembly point in the car park until all clear is given to return to the building. That's happened to me once in 25, 30 years, and we stood in the rain for about an hour and then we all came back in again, nothing happened. Webcast. The meeting is being webcast. Please remind members who will be sharing microphones to press the button once carefully once, and the microphone will come on, and then turn it off when you finish speaking. Mobile phones should be switched off during the meeting. So welcome to all, and welcome to viewers on the webcast. I'm going to run straight into the agenda now with the first item, which is apologies. I received late apologies from Stuart Morris, who was unable to attend today. Do we have any others there?
We have replacements, Chair. So County Councillor Rupert Swarbrick will be replacing Sue Hind. County Councillor Sean Serridge will be replacing Councillor Erica Lewis.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much. Okay, the first item is the Constitution, Chair and Deputy Chair membership and terms of reference. I think you'll find that on agenda item 2, which is page 1. Basically, the report is for noting. Is that agreed, or anybody have any comments on it? Okay, can we take it as noted? Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, disclosure of personal and prejudicial interest. Anybody got anything to declare? No, thank you. So we move on to 4, and that's minutes of the previous meeting, which you'll see on page 9. The meeting was held in March, and it was a virtual meeting. And of course, we had to cancel the midsummer one. And here again, it's just for noting. Any comments on the minutes? Thank you very much. All agreed? Good. Okay, the next item, item number 5, is the appointment of the Joint Health Scrutiny Committee. This is a reconfiguration of the hyper-acute stroke service across North Mersey and West Lancashire, and we've been asked to give the names of 2 members from County Hall to join with members from Knowsley, Kirkby and Liverpool. As I say, it's the south of the county, including that part of Merseyside that I've just referred to. Councillor David Westley, Chair of our Health Scrutiny Committee, is to be on that committee. David, would you like to say a few words? You press the symbol in the middle, which has got a recurring half circle.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it's a joint health committee similar to the one we have set up for Lancashire and South Cumbria. West Lancashire is excluded from that. It's in with North Mersey, and it's to change the stroke service. And we had a briefing from North Mersey to the steering group for the Health Scrutiny Committee, and we were required to decide whether it was substantial change, variation in the service, and we were of the opinion as it was. It's a statutory obligation to make that decision. The other 3 councils, Knowsley, Sefton and Liverpool, also decided the same, their health scrutiny committees. And that now means that there has to be a public consultation on the reconfiguration, the change. And also there also has to be a joint health committee. That's a statutory obligation imposed on us by the government. The service, the changes, in my opinion, are needed. There's some issues over the quality of the service, particularly at Southport Hospital. Apparently, it's essential that for the best outcome for people who have survived a stroke is a procedure within the first 2 days And I think only about 50% of the people who get treated in Southport are having that procedure. And the proposed variations to set up a centre of excellence here at Aintree Hospital, where all the patients from West Lancashire will be taken, treated in the first 2 days. That does have implications because we have a hospital in Ormskirk and one in Southport, both underutilised, and there's strong feelings locally. So we thought a public consultation would be appropriate. We'll look at it in much more detail when we have the joint committee.
Thank you, David. Just Gary can't be with us today. He's the clerk to the Health Scrutiny Committee, but he sent a note, which in all fairness to me, he's gone to the trouble of sending it, and I think I'll just read you the relevant part of it. It says the proposed joint committee is a mandatory purpose. If it is not agreed by the county, will not have representation on the joint committee and therefore no recourse to provide formal comments on the public consultation, nor the power of referral to the Secretary of State. The joint committees to be established will be considered with this proposal only. The proposal by the local NHS will affect the residents of Liverpool, Knowsley, Sefton, Merseyside and West Lancashire. Health scrutiny is a function of the county and therefore not a two district councils into their authorities. And he just says, I hope that covers everything. It does. It's going to, I think it's going to be beneficial. As soon as we knew about it, we agreed that we would join it. And that's basically it. And if anybody's got any questions, I'll try and answer. Yes, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. I think it's really important that we have our say and that scrutiny is effective in looking at any significant change in the delivery of services in the NHS. That's what health scrutiny is all about. We've got a scrutiny committee of our own, and I think my comments really with regard to this is that we need to know who will be servicing the committee, because obviously it's across lots of district boundaries and county and district boundaries and metropolitan boundaries, and therefore it's important that we understand and get information to the scrutiny committee, the joint scrutiny committee, in a timely manner, just as it is all about being a timely manner in providing the service in order to get the best outcome for stroke victims. And so too, it's important that if health scrutiny joint working groups like this are established, then members receive information in advance, because I chaired for a while the Health Scrutiny Committee at Lancashire County Council, as many of you will know, and it can be really very unwielding, not least because of the numbers of people involved and members and turning up and people trying to play catch up with the information that they've got in order to make good decisions. It is a little embarrassing sometimes. So I think the administration of and the service of the committee is absolutely crucial, and we need to say that it needs to be done in a timely manner. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, in fact, I was only advised about the proposal just a week ago today, in fact, and had no hesitation in saying, yes, we should be in, and David and Eddie Pope quickly agreed to be on the committee. Gary, I did ask Gary if he had any idea of timescales, etc., but the inaugural meeting hasn't been set up yet, as far as I know. You've got no dates yet, have you, David?
No, Chairman. Of course, I'm not even sure where it will be held.
No, I understand that, because that was one of the questions I asked.
Between the four councils to decide. Yeah,
it's probably going to be held in North Merseyside, I should think, that area, because Sefton, Knowsley and Liverpool are going to be dominant in it to some degree. So there will, I'm sure David will bring a report back to the Health Scrutiny Committee after every meeting of the joint committee. So if we can all agree with that, we'll move on to the next item.
Just so long as our members are appropriately armed in order to ask the right questions of the right people at the right time. That's the key to good scrutiny in my view.
I agree with you. Okay, thank you. So we go on to the next item. I'll just move those out of the way, which is the report of the Budget Scrutiny Committee. And the Internal Scrutiny Committee are asked to consider membership of the Budget Review Panel, agree, amend the terms, and they're listed as A and B, and note the update from the Budget Review Committee on the 1st September. Fortunately, David is with us. He just happens to be chairman of that committee. So perhaps you could speak on it for a few seconds on that.
Well, yes, we had our first meeting. There was very little on the agenda apart from the report on money matters that came to recent cabinet, and that basically set out the current position of the council's finances and indication of how the first quarter had gone. Our work really starts another meeting in, I think it's November and January. We're looking at how the commercialisation process is going in November. And of course, the budget proposals we're looking at closely when initially start working on those. I do have background. I was a finance portfolio holder of West Lancs for 6 years. I was a county councillor for 8 years before this.
Thank you. And just on the recommendation is to consider members of the Budget Scrutiny Panel for either A or B. I think it is A at the present time. Are you happy to continue with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we haven't had names put forward for 2 of the positions.
No, I know.
And I always think if people aren't particularly interested in finance, then probably better they're not on. It's something you need to get into and have an interest in. Otherwise, so I'm quite happy to work with that number. Okay, thank you. Any comments from members? No, so can accept that. Move on to the next item. Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment on recommendation 3 in relation to public realm agreements. I wasn't sure if you were moving onto that now or moving on to the next agenda item on this.
No, please do it now.
Okay. So I think we really should bring this forward as a scrutiny topic. I'm sure many people get comments from their residents about the public realm, and it's one of those words that actually can mean many different things to many different people, but I'm taking it to mean the pavements around our towns and streets. And I do think there's quite a lot that we could be doing better in relation to that. And I don't want to get into the topic of what should be scrutinised, of course, but for example, we have had quite a lot of money to bring really nice stone pavements in Burnley, and then when repairs are done, they just rip out the stones and replace them with tarmac, and it's starting to look really awful. They're not putting cement in between the paving, so lots of weeds are growing through them, and unfortunately that is encouraging the use of glyphosate, which is a dangerous chemical. We should limit that as much as possible, and also drop curbs are a real big problem, I'm sure elsewhere, but in Burnley in particular. We've just elected a councillor to our district council who cannot get on their mobility scooter from their home to the town hall, and they live less than a mile away. So those kinds of things I think are really important. We need to look at them. So I would ask that we do bring that forward as a scrutiny topic.
I understand what you're saying, and I've a lot of sympathy for it. What I read through that, and I was a bit concerned about it in this respect. We have the internal scrutiny meeting, we have the external scrutiny meeting, now the budget scrutiny meeting. Now, what I don't want to do is duplicate it. What we do on this internal scrutiny committee, and we do it quite often, is to bring highways to this committee to answer questions like the ones you've raised. And I just think that we're probably more powerful in a more powerful position than possibly a budget scrutiny committee might be, which wouldn't meet as often as this, I shouldn't think. But there is no reason why the budget scrutiny committee, if they get concerns regarding such matters, can't invite members from the highways team and the portfolio of highways to come before that committee and answer questions. Would you be happy with that?
Yeah, it's essentially just making sure that the scrutiny
Yeah.
of this is happening.
I
is
mean, I'm thoroughly
important.
on board with what you're saying, because you are quite right. And it's a total irritation of mine. You know, we all look at our own area and we think, God, why is it so bad? Or why is this? I'll tell you, okay, Steve, last weekend I was in the beautiful county of Hertfordshire. My son lives in a beautiful little village, and he lives in a somewhat rural road, but it goes into the village. And the pavements and the gully were that deep with weeds all the way. And I said to my wife, this place is never going to win a best kept village. I was surprised how badly it was Hertfordshire County Council is responsible for it, not the local parish council or the town council, if there is one. So, you know, it is something right across the country, and it's becoming worse. So I agree entirely with you, and it's a constant concern of mine. And as a councillor that has a large rural area, it's something I get a lot of as well, because those people feel neglected. And as I'm always pointing out in this committee and in other committees, they also pay council tax, and they deserve the same treatment as everybody else. Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting one, public realm, because obviously as a two-tier authority, there's two different organisations feel, even if in reality it's not the case, there's a responsibility for public realm. And I think one of the solutions that Scrutiny need to be looking at is some closer working relationships between the districts and the counties for as long as those two organisations remain. It's important, if we're going to tackle some of the issues you're talking about, then we need to be scrutinising the relationship between our offices at county and district offices at various different districts. And you'll probably find somewhere in that mix there'll be an area of best practice which we could suggest and roll out to everyone at all the different organisations across the county.
Can I ask you to bring that up again when we come to the work plan? Because when we come to the work plan, that's something we can put on this committee, that
yeah,
we have look at it in the future, because we're doing it later this morning.
Sure.
And something which we can put down for a future meeting of this committee. And again, specialising in that on highway matters rather than the generality that we often have when we talk about gritting and other matters appertaining to highways, which are numerous. So it's worthwhile. I'm sure the two of you would like to see that as something that we can discuss soon on this committee.
Leading on from there, we obviously have the external scrutiny committee, so expanding the public realm agreements, that there is the result of permits and reinstatements by statutory undertakers. Now, my experience, and as others been on external scrutiny, and we're seeing that, for instance, there we're seeing Electricity Northwest, we're seeing United Utilities, and I think maybe our friends on external scrutiny, when from time to time they see them, it's the standard of reinstatement there. I know it expands the original comment, but I just throw that one in. I think we all understand what I'm saying on that. So I think that's one to bear in mind for external scrutiny when we do perhaps have an informal talk with them.
Thank you, John. Well, we made our comments on it. I'm sure you picked them up, haven't you, Ms. Spa? And with that and your agreement, we'll move on to the next item. Okay, thank you. So, David, I know you've got another meeting. Please feel free to leave. Thank you for attending this morning. So the next item is an annual item. We found it fascinating last year, the number of questions. Chris has come today to represent his department. So it's the Regulatory of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. It always sounds like a sinister title to me, but I'm sure it's not. As we learned last year. So we're going to be asked to consider a number of things, but before we do that, I'll introduce you to Chris, and I'm sure you'll give us an update as what's going to happen and what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So the purpose of this report really is to ask the committee to review the policies and agree the policies that the authority has in place concerning surveillance. That's normally surveillance linked to criminal investigations and primarily in this authority conducted by the Training Standards Service, although other services may have need to use the policies. So the purpose is to review the policies that are in there and then to update you on the use of those powers over the last 12 months. In terms of the policies, there are 3 policies that have been reviewed. One is the RIPA policy, that's the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, and our policies concerning that. As an authority, we also have what we call a shadow RIPA policy. So that's a procedure where surveillance authorisations may not be required, but we do have safeguards in place, and that policy sets those out. And the third one is the use of social media and internet in investigations, because that's an ever-increasing and problematic area for investigators. In terms of updates to the policies, that they are very few this year. Most of them are grammatical and formatting changes to the policy. In terms of the RIPA policy, there is one amendment to the length of time that an authorisation for surveillance could remain in place, where a juvenile is used as the source of that information. Previously, a 1-month authorisation can only be granted by the courts. That has now changed to 4 months. So the policy reflects that change in timescale. In terms of usage in the last 12 months, the answer is there's been no applications for directed surveillance. So that's using officers or equipment to observe activities of individuals under investigation. There's been no applications for the use of informants in investigations either last 12 months. In terms of the scrutiny of the authority, the Investigative Powers and Commissioner's Office audit the authority every 3 years. We were audited last year, so we're not due until next year, right, 2022. And then the only recommendation from the last report was that as an authority, we refresh the training for officers who may get involved in this area of work. That's ongoing. We're hoping to get that done by the end of this financial year. It looks like there's about 60 or so officers across the authority that will need some form of refresher training. So we're currently discussing those needs with learning and development. And that, councillors, is the extent of this report really this year.
Good, thank you very much. It's a comprehensive report. I hope you've all had time to read through it properly. Please feel free to ask any questions of Chris. I'm sure he'll do his best. Councillor Holgate.
Thank you, Chair. This report seems familiar to me. I think, is it not the RIPA thing that we have to review and revise every year in order to ensure that it's up to standard, because it is dealing with such a sensitive issue? I don't see any real difference between the situation we're sitting at now than we were last year, and therefore I'm happy to recommend the recommendations that are in the report, and because it's a pretty standard thing. It has to be done. It has to be seen to be rigorously done because it's a serious matter. But I don't see any major changes that concern me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fearing.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make an administrative point through you, if that's possible, to officers when reports like this come to scrutiny. If in my day job, I'm a solicitor, and if I was sending documents with revisions without putting track changes or a red line, I would be rounded upon. And I just wonder whether going forward, if we're having these kind of standard documents that are coming every 12 months, that if there are any minor revisions, that they are clearly shown in the document itself.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe leading on from that, obviously no application for observation in the last 12 months. Going back pre-COVID, I know I'm putting you on the spot there. Were there any applications in, say, 2019, 18? How does it compare with this last year?
Oh, I don't have the exact figures, but from memory, in the last report, there was an update on usage. And I think there was a small number of times where it was used in the prior 12 months.
Just before we move on, and just for interested members, really, we had a briefing a couple of days ago, and I did ask Chris, because it's always something which has concerned me as an individual, and that is the number of shopkeepers who know what they're doing and quite illegally sell both tobacco and alcohol to underage people. Now, a couple of years ago, this was highlighted on one of these committee reports, and I asked him whether or not that we knew there's been an increase, whether whether prosecuting more retailers, whether we are using covert methods to trace it, and he answered the question. Could you explain to them what his situation is?
Yes, certainly. So there are circumstances where we carry out test purchasing activities exactly as described, where a young person will be asked to enter an off license, for example, to buy an age-restricted product. There are times where that activity can take place without surveillance authorizations being in place. Equally, there are times where it may be necessary to obtain an authorization. For example, if you're asking the test purchaser to develop a relationship over a period of time with a business by making themselves familiar, by going in, buying products that weren't age restricted in the first instance to get themselves known in that area, where you've got information that from the police, for example, that suggests that shopkeeper will only sell to kids who go to the local high school or live in the local vicinity. So there will be occasions where surveillance authorizations will be needed, but in the majority of cases for age restricted sales investigations, surveillance authorizations aren't required.
Thank you. I mentioned that particularly because it's happened in lots of areas. The local pub in the village I live in is closed down, and it's now a retail convenience shop. And within months of it opening, we literally had dozens of views. I mean, I'm not talking about 20 or 30, up to 70 some evenings, hanging around outside and getting alcohol and getting cigarettes. And there was a lot of fuss in the village. The police were called, and they did the surveillance on the place for over a week. Then the deputy chief superintendent came to the village hall to explain what action to be taken. It's quieted down a lot like that. But the problem wasn't really the kids. It was to a degree, the retail letting that happen to it. I know there was some intimidation as well, but it's something you have to be very careful about, because what happened was, particularly with the alcohol, they got out of control. They were doing wheelies in the middle of the road on the A59 and stupid things like that. And the police admitted that some of them were affected by the alcohol. So you have to be very careful that you control these things, because obviously young people generally aren't used to drinking alcohol and the effects it has on them. So it's just something to raise, and something we need to be careful about. And as you know, with a lot of these convenience shops, they're open up till 11 o'clock at night, which again causes some problem in the community, but it was no different from the public house being open. No, I never objected to it. But we didn't get people doing wheelies when they came out of the pub. Certainly not on the A59. So with that, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the report. We've asked the questions. Thank you very much, Chris. Can we move on? Thank you very much. Chris, go if you wish to. Although the rest could be fascinating. Okay, the next item is number 8, and that's the work programme. Now, Steve, do you want to just mention that again? That's because I think it was a worthwhile comment that you made about the public realm area.
I think the public realm issue is one that receives a lot of attention from the public. It is of concern to residents. It is an issue and an area of activity that is both applied on by the county council and district councils, and to an extent parish councils. So we have a relationship where the county council sometimes will pay a parish council to do certain works on its behalf, and the same applies with the district councils. We have some district councils that do cleaning of gutters and pavements on behalf of the county council, and that relationship is different in every different district, and sometimes that's to do with capacity, and sometimes to do with what the district sees as a priority over and above other things. But it's a really interesting area of activity, and because we're a 2/3-tier authority, there are opportunities that are missed, and there are situations where that also get missed in terms of requirement or aspirational requirement by local residents. And therefore, I think it's a really important area that we need to scrutinise to see where best practice lies and test where best practice lies. But it would require a committee to interview 2 or 3 different tiers of authority. So it might be quite a well, not a time-consuming one, but in longevity. But in terms of application to set it up, it might be tricky. But I think it's one that's certainly worth attempting to.
Well, it might be an idea for a task and finish group, considering what you're saying, because that way we could actually interview various people from outside this authority. One of the things that I've always felt strongly about, and I've reported it many times here over the years, and that is the lack of cooperation between borough and county over things like the grass cutting. Now, you might think, well, what's he talking about? The grass cutting gets done. So we're talking about, in my own patch, this very large stretch of the A59, which goes to the boundary with Sefton. And I've tried over many years to get the county and the borough to work together with regard to a litter picking before the grass cutting. That doesn't happen very often. So what happens is these vehicles go down the middle of the dual carriageway, a wide central reservation, grass on both sides, and the carriageway is littered with Coke cans and pieces of plastic and broken glass. It looks like confetti the day after because they cut all these bits up with the mowing machine, which of course get broken. The glass of the tins get torn to shreds, and then because of the public concern, the borough come along and sweep it all. If it was done the day before or the week before, or whatever, it would be more sensible. Now, that's just one thing I've noticed over the years and constantly complain about when it doesn't happen the way I'd like it to happen in my own patch. But I do feel it's something which is really important. Yeah, I'll take a minute. And John did mention external. So what we need to do, and I'm sure Ms. Spot and Gary will discuss this between them as to which committee is dealing with it. I'm not pressured about where it goes, but I do think it might be worth having a joint working group as a group.
Thanks, Chairman. It will be remiss of me not to support these comments thus far, particularly representing a very heavily parished patch in Ribble Valley, where the concurrent functions problem, as I think we would call it over there, is an annual nightmare, and this will be a brilliant opportunity to try and resolve that. And we have a very effective parish council liaison group in Ribble Valley that would be an excellent consultee.
Well, I think we've got the message there, have we? Any other yes, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. It is on something totally different. Am I all right raising it now?
Sorry.
It is on something totally different.
Yeah.
It's temporary traffic lights.
Yes.
They pop up everywhere. I wanted to know what the County Council's agreement are with United Utilities, whoever digs the road up. I think the councillors should have some input into what is physically agreed with these firms. At the present moment in time, they are digging up the 585 at Kirkham, outside an industrial estate, a huge housing estate, for houses across the road. And there's 4-way temporary traffic lights there. And they need them, but there's a gang of 2 working from 9 o'clock till 4 o'clock. Now, when the county council do any work on the 585, from what I can see, they try to do it at night, and then they can shut the whole road, and they can physically move things along. There is a meat processing plant on this industrial estate, and the wagons take an hour to get in at times and an hour to get out. They are delivering to supermarkets, and they are being penalised for being late. And the supermarkets don't understand how it can be at the present moment in time, the pressure that there are on wagon drivers. I do feel I have tried my best to get some action on it. Don't think I haven't, but I think it's because it's United Utilities, we can't object, and I think there should be guidelines. This plant works 24 hours, and to have temporary traffic lights working at night, you know, it's beyond the pale. That they would be able to go in and out freely at night if things were packed up and shut away, and they leave them on for the weekend. Nobody comes Saturday or Sunday, and the whole area is in chaos. Kirkham, everybody's going through the middle of Kirkham, and it's chaos everywhere. And I just think if it's not us, it's external scrutiny. We should be looking at the policy. Please, Mr. Chairman.
I suffered the very same thing this morning on my way here, where temporary traffic lights, I sat through 3 changes because the number of vehicles that built up, and the extraordinary problem was they seemed to be letting the lights go green to the side roads instead of the main road for longer periods. You're quite right. However, statutory undertakings, utility companies, I should say, they do have a right to do roadworks. They should give notification to county. They should give advance. And I'm sure we all suffered this, but in the last week, absolute truth, I have 6 roads, not just in my division, but in my village, being closed for emergency cabling. All in different parts of the village, not connected. It can't be emergency cabling all of a sudden in 6 different roads being closed with less than that 24 hours notification. Even this morning, I got one to say that another road's being closed, emergency cabling over the weekend. Now, the residents aren't aware of that because they couldn't possibly be aware of it. I got it direct from our people here. So I do think it needs a good coat of looking at. You're quite right. John.
Chairman, I know that our colleague was going to come in. Just to make a comment on there. I mean, this is the bane of our life. There are 2 aspects to temporary traffic lights. One will be where officers give, as I said before, a permit for work to happen. And that can be, as the chair said, it can be immediate emergency work. So there's permits given where we don't know as members they're going to happen unless you go every day, as I've got to, on the Lancashire County Council site, permits and traffic regulation orders. So the permits I tend to watch very carefully. Now, the traffic regulation orders, as members, we should always get pre-notice of those going to be implemented. We get 5 days in which to ask questions about them. My recommendation is, even at the moment, if the temporary lights mentioned, do that investigation, but coming back to the reality, it goes back to what we said earlier in the meeting, where it started with public realm, but statutory undertakers permits. And I think the chair's right. It's a good probability that could be added external scrutiny with the statutory undertakers.
Well, as it happens, John, if you look at the work programme, quality of highway repairs is the next month's, on next meeting, November's meeting. Review the standard of highway repairs carried out by external organisations and contractors, and that's we have presumably LCC officers and possibly representatives of external organisations. And these questions about both temporary traffic lights, the delays, the lack of work, the problem I mentioned before has been going on since probably mid to late June. We've had those temporary traffic lights, and I regularly pass that spot, not coming here, but going to other places. Nobody working there during the day. I passed last week at about 3:30 with 3 guys sitting on the back of a vehicle. One was on his mobile phone, one was reading the paper, and one was just staring at us all with a grin on his face. Now, I'm not saying they might be having a tea break. I don't know their method of working, but I do know it seems to be an awful long time to do what I would have thought, and I'm not a highways person, as you know, to do what I would have thought a reasonably simple job to retarmac an area of road. Rupert.
Thanks, Chairman. I'd just like to endorse this, the points being made, and to add that I suspect that if we responded to a TRO notice, we'd be told that it's got to happen anyway, pal. It's tough, and I just wonder whether our local intelligence would do anything other than just highlight an issue that we're just going to have to. We've just been told it's tough. It's got to happen, and I've got a particular issue in my patch at the moment where it's an ongoing emergency, and the comms by the contractor to us as the county and its community is absolutely diabolical. And if the community had just was briefed, it could make its own contingency plans. And the contractor, although pressed by our guys, and they've done, and our people have tried very hard, they need to be upping their game about the communication. It's an absolute disaster at the moment.
Right. If you look at the work programme, and we just look at next month to begin with, 12th of November, we've got an update on the local government funding and generation task group, and there'll be an update from AJ on that. Drainage issues, another very popular topic on this committee. And then we've got the highway repairs I mentioned before. One of the things I was going to mention as a result of this morning's meeting, which I think hopefully it's gone quite well, at the joint meeting which you attended, Steve, a few weeks ago, where we discussed making sure we didn't have duplication between external and internal, there was concern from members that sometimes we had too many items on this committee and we didn't get time to do them all justice because we tried to get rid of tried to get over by midday or half midday at the latest. And today's worked well. Don't judge today by other meeting by today's meeting, because that RIP report was a relatively straightforward report. We didn't need a lot of questioning, and it's a comprehensive paper in there if you read it. So I do think it's worked well, this. And I think we should limit major items to 1 or 2. 1, so members don't get fed up, start looking at the watches, have to leave early. And 2, we give justice to the important things that we're discussing. So I think it's worked well today. So I think apart from that, unless there's anybody else wants to comment. Yes, Councillor Fewing.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I just wanted to close the loop on the public realm thing, because I did want to say one thing, and that's just that I completely agree with what Councillor Holgate said, that we need to have this, discussion with the other councils, and I endorse the idea of a task and finish group, and I just wasn't sure what the next step for that was. And forgive me, first time on the committee, but how do we make that happen, I suppose, would be my question.
It has to be agreed by one of the most important committees on the council, and that's this committee. So any task and finish group comes to us for agreement, but we can't do it now until we know the details of it. So we'll have that item on the next agenda for agreement. Otherwise, Steve.
Chairman, just for the sake of expediency, whilst I recognise that this committee is sacred and sacrosanct and all-powerful, could we not, in order to move the process on a little, because I can't recall when our next meeting is, but
12th of November.
if there's an opportunity for the chair and vice chair to be given the powers, delegated powers, to progress that once the detail is involved, is available.
Good idea.
Then we could do that if committee's agreeable,
Yeah.
because it just saves time, because otherwise
That's a good
we
idea.
might have everything in place in 3 weeks' time, and yet we're waiting 10 weeks in order to.
Okay. I mean, these task and finish groups, the ones John and I have been on over many years, they're not political. We work together as a team. We try not to be political. There's no point to it. One of the best ones we ever did was Kevin Ellard, a retired Labour councillor, chaired, and that was the arts and museums and the dramas groups we went to. A really excellent committee. It lasted about a year, and we went to various parts of the county to look at theatres and theatre groups. And I didn't know, for instance, there's one literally across the road in Preston, across the road from the chamber here, in a pub, a very popular local theatre group there. So, and we were talking about the lack of funding for local, the Grand and the Dukes and all that, they get their funding, but all these amateur groups and some of the smaller theatres don't get a penny, or at least they, what it was happening then, it was very, very difficult for them to get the money. So we hope we resolve that to a degree. So yeah, they do have purpose, and we'll get that sorted as you suggested, Steve. So that's it. We'll move on to the next item, which is urgent business. I have no urgent business, and the date of the next meeting, I think I said before, is the 12th of November. Thank you all for coming. Since the meetings, is the camera off now? The webcast off? Oh, we did. Okay. Okay. Just to tell you something about traffic. I mentioned I went to Hertfordshire last week. Normally it takes me 4 hours to get to my son's house in a very nice village called Brupping. I got